Navigating an SAP transformation? We get it. By day, we work hands-on with people like you across the globe. By night, we share what actually works. Welcome to Transformation Every Day with Alexander Greb and Johannes Languth, where your complex transformation becomes clear, actionable, and achievable.
Welcome everybody. My name is Alexander Greb. I'm Consulting Director at CBS Corporate Business Solutions, and you are listening to Transformation Every Day, expert insights and stories on SAP and beyond. Quick heads up before we start. Today's episode is not your typical Transformation Everyday format. This is one of two special episodes we're releasing before Season 2 officially starts in March. And we decided to share this because the following conversation was simply too strong to remain just a webcast recording. So what you're about to hear is a joint ASUG and CBS Fireside Chat I co-hosted together with my colleague Victor Puente. Our guests were Geoff Scott, CEO of America's SAP User Group, and Zara Horn, CIO of Current Lighting. Now, here is why this episode really matters. Current Lighting moved to RISE with SAP, but not in 24 months, not in 18 months, but in just 5 months. 5. And we're not talking about a small technical conversion or a startup. No, we're talking about a market leader, about a private equity carve-out. Two companies, different histories, legacy ECC on one side, S/4HANA on the other, organizational change, data consolidation, process harmonization, you name it. 5 months. In this conversation, you will hear what made that possible, and more importantly, what they deliberately decided not to do. You will hear why leadership drew a hard line around customization, why they limited data migration, why they refused to turn this into an IT exercise, and why Fit to Standard was not a slogan, but a business rule. So if you're currently planning an S/4HANA move, if you're debating RISE, if someone tells you these things always take 2 years, this episode may challenge that. So let's jump into this very special Transformation Everyday conversation with ASUG, CBS, and Zara Horn from Current Lighting. Thank you very much. Hello everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's ASUG and CBS Fireside Chat. My name is Alexander Greb. I am Consulting Director at CBS and your host for today. And I'm delighted to have you with all of us as we explore one of the most important topics in the SAP ecosystem today, which is how organizations are transforming with RISE with SAP and the move to the cloud. We have a wonderful guest today here, Ms. Zara Horn, who will lead us through her journey through the cloud. And also we have Geoff Scott, CEO of ASUG, here with us. And my fellow host is Victor Puente from CBS.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
And looking forward to hear, first-hand perspectives from you, which are leaders who shaped the journey. To start, we have something of a two-block setup today. So we start with a conversation with Geoff, move on then to Zara. And if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to put them into the chat box. And some, if they are fit very well into it, I think we could answer them immediately. Otherwise, do not feel frustrated if it's not happening. We will collect everything and then in the end, in the Q&A spots, answer them on block, if that's okay with everybody. Perfect. Geoffrey, great to have you here.
Wonderful to have you on ASUG. Yeah, as always, normally when you and I do this conversation, I'm on your podcast, and now you're podcasting and webcasting on our platform. So what an interesting way to do this today. So I'm at your beck and call, my friend.
You're already putting in the first advertisement break. Thank you. Yes, exactly. If I want to give just a shout out for everybody who is interested into best practices in digital transformation. I have a podcast which is called Transformation Every Day. You can get it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Geoff was already guest, so it's a perfect place for everybody.
Only once. You never had me back again. No, I'm kidding. You've had me back again.
I had you in my old podcast twice. So we will add the numbers definitely. Awesome. Geoffrey, I heard a very, very interesting quote lately, which is that we are in defining decade for SAP customers, one where the cloud is not just an option, but a necessity for staying competitive. What's your opinion on that?
I think when I hear that, I kind of zoom out a little bit, Alex, and I kind of think about the broader, kind of what's happening in the world today. How do we as technologists interpret an era where, there's just tectonic uncertainty, global uncertainty, economic uncertainty. There's just lots of things moving around. And I think, we live in an era of just unprecedented change. And when everything is kind of up in the air and swirling around, and we don't necessarily know from one day to the next which way is up, to me, that really drives this need to say we need to be as businesses and as professionals as flexible as possible, right? We need to be able to move and shake however we want to move and shake. And we might need to move right one day. We might want to move left another day, up, down, whatever that is. So I think as technologists, the biggest gift we can give to our businesses is the ability to be flexible and react instantly in these really hyper-charged times. So what does that mean? To me, that means that we as technologists have to be able to rely on more out-of-the-box solutions and be able to push responsibility in code back to the folks who are probably in the best areas to be able to manage it and support it. So when I think about that, that means we do need to be invested in cloud solutions, not because of cloud, but because it allows us to move faster. We need to be more invested in SaaS-based applications where we move code responsibility to other parts of the business. I'm hearing do you have a mic problem with me? Am I not clear, or you guys can hear me okay?
I can hear you well. We have sometimes
okay.
A little bit of weird noise coming around, but you're perfectly understandable.
Okay. I was just noticing that there is a comment that maybe we have some mic issues, but hopefully I'm okay. Anyway, so where was I in this, right? So to me, when I think about where we need to be, as technologists, it's about rapid adoption of solutions that allow our businesses to be the most flexible, right? Now, there's an ideal state of that, which would say, I want to be able to do public cloud, SaaS-based applications. That may not be achievable for a lot of businesses because businesses at the end of the day are complex. Honestly, how do we work on the most important things? How do we keep our customizations to the minimum set required so that when we spend time thinking about how to move and adapt to this ever-changing world, we can adapt faster? To me, that's the key of it. So I want to pause there and ask you if that makes sense, Alex.
Absolutely, from my perspective. And the interesting thing is when I talk to customers and so on, and you challenge them a little bit. Yeah, you quite often hear basically from anybody, of course, we are innovative and we do a lot of things and so on. But when you dig a little bit deeper, then you find out that the journey they had until now is in many cases one migration after migration and one update after one update with basically the same set of technology, basically the same set of processes. So in the end, what they are using is their strategy from 20 years ago implemented with the technology from 20 years ago. And always migrated. So the learning that I got from this is that basically on-prem systems, where you have all the freedom, they tend to give you something like, let's say, a lack of discipline to really move up to the latest capabilities, to really try to engage in innovation, security, and resilience. What does your research of ASUG says of that?
Right. So I think you kind of come back to the central point, which is if we want to have the ability to be as innovative as possible at speed, we can't be innovative and at the same time be forced to support legacy applications that take a phenomenal amount of time. Every opportunity we have where we're inside the community at our 39 chapter meetings, we put up a series of slides and we ask some probing questions. And the data that comes back across the entire North American spectrum is very consistent. Most of our folks who are working on SAP systems are spending more time maintaining them than they are innovating them. Now, we see it start to change when you ask certain questions about public cloud adoption, and you start to see some migrations away from this legacy set of systems that we created over decades. And you start to see the opportunity for people to do things differently. So if my job requires me to make sure that all the reports are running every day, to keep all the customizations moving, to make sure the zillions of interfaces that we have operating, and all of those, as much as we talk about them being flexible, they're not, they're brittle. If most of my day is spent in front of my laptop, in front of my screens, making sure my infrastructure is running, I can't be innovating. And I can't be spending the same amount of time with my business partners across the enterprise, really understanding how they need to do business in drastically different times and how we can bring technology solutions to them that make sense. So that's how I think about it, right? So for me, I believe that the road to SaaS-based solutions has to be also about freeing up time for our technology teams to spend more time with the business working on innovation that unlocks future potential, which means that our businesses also have to start saying something else important, which is it's not about how I want to be special. It's about how I can adopt these out-of-the-box solutions so I too can innovate at scale. And that's hard as well, really hard.
One interesting story that comes into my brain when you say that is that one organization, one customer, they were still running ECC and they were producing, so they had the MRP running and so on. The problem was that the MRP concept that they had was fine when they first moved to ECC like 15, 20 years ago. So they had the MRP running like twice a day, so everything went fine with them. But of course, with time, with complexity, with data volume rising and so on, they found out that they cannot run that kind of system anymore with at least one MRP in the day, because they had one system, global operating company. So there was not that slot anymore where everybody was sleeping in the night so they could run their MRP. So they were forced to run it on the weekend. And only if they really switch anything off, which makes even the old MRP a good thing, like alerts and so on and all that stuff. Yeah. So a whole organization was for years caught on trying to get that MRP through that weekend so they could continue working start working again in the next week, while still working in the end on a, let's say, planning setup, which was 7 days old. So moving to the cloud relieves of that kind of activities, of that kind of duties, of that kind of, let's say, load on your organization, because you are trimmed to be all the time on the latest technology, which is able to cope with your data amounts and your data numbers, which is able to cope with your challenges and your complexities, and as such, freeing resources and freeing capacity to actually care for what matters most, which is the business opportunities that you have.
How do you deal with MRP systems that were built 10, 15 years ago, to your point, under a very different time? Now that have to deal with, if you're in North America, a continuing changing of tariffs and other things, right? Where do you source materials? How do you best source them economically, right? How do I think about international trade? And not just, the tariffs coming out of the United States, how are other countries retaliating in those tariffs? How do we think about all of that and how it refers to pricing, right? And it's not as if these things are changing and we have 6 months to 9 months to a year's notice. They're changing in a matter of weeks, and then they're changing again. So to me, this underscores the basic business case that we have to be able to somehow create systems that have a lot more flexibility built into them to allow us to do these things as we need to do them. 15, 20 years ago, we as technologists implemented systems like SAP because they had amazing capability to be customized to meet our business needs. 15, 20 years hence, those customizations are coming back to haunt us, right? Because they are not liberating us and allowing us to change quickly. They're forcing us to go, well, why was all that customization written? Everyone's used to it. How do I undo it? Right? And that's complicated. And that's even more complicated when we're under the gun trying to get this stuff done in a very short period of time.
Geoff, you have probably the best overview. Sorry?
Go ahead, Alex. Sorry. I know I was going to keep going, but I think I've said enough on this piece.
No, I don't want to interrupt you. Sorry. Please continue. Go ahead.
You go ahead. No, we're so polite with each other. No, where were you going to go?
Okay, perfect. Based on that, what you said, and what comes into my mind is, since you have probably the best overview about what's happening inside the offices and the factories and so on of SAP customers, how they work, how they approach topics and approach transformation. If I would ask you, what would be, let's say, the top 3 best practices that you experience and that you would propose to community members who are about to move into that direction and to go into that journey, what would be those top 3 best practices that are quite good ideas to build upon this journey?
Yeah. So the first one is the most hardest by far. And it's these 2 words called change management, right? It's the ability for us to really manage a set of changes. It's not just about technologists. It's about business change and being willing to adopt other people's suggestions on the solution over what we think is a better process, right? So when does our better process, which it might be better, become economically unsupportable by the broader business? We all can figure out better ways to do things, but we need to also understand where those better ways may not be better when you put them into the grand scheme of everything that's required to make it run. But change management to me really means that we need to spend less time changing our systems and more time changing how we approach things as individuals and team members and business users. That to me is the hardest of all of this. And by the way, when going gets really tough, it's easy to throw your hands up in the air and say, fine, we'll just make the customization to make this happen. And then at that point in time, you've created a scenario where that customization is now embedded. It has to be supported for a long, long time. So change management to me is number 1. Number 2, we talk about business transformation. But we cannot have business transformation if we as technology practitioners are not willing to undergo professional transformation. So how much time are we spending learning new skills, thinking through different ways to do things, spending time learning the future SAP platforms like BTP, like Joule, right? Spending time really testing our knowledge about how we think about these things through a different lens. So we really absolutely have to think through, what does it mean to professionally transform so my business can transform? And then the third thing, and I think you're going to get to this in a little bit, we can't spend 3 to 4 to 5 years having this transformation take place. We need to move more quickly. So how do we go find the better wins that help us work through these successes?
I just had to look at Sarah ticking off all the things like done that.
Much better than I am, Alex. She's much better. She's living this every day. I get to talk about it. She actually has to live through this.
We have one question.
I was thinking, so were you here last week? Are you sitting in my meetings? What's happening right now?
Well, I happen to also know what your boss pretty well.
So, a little connection there. Yeah.
I have a little connection there.
So, he was talking on the plane.
Yeah. And so, but I want to hear your perspective. Sorry, Alex.
No, absolutely. Because it's very interesting what you say. And when Sarah says, like, are you sitting in our meetings? It again underlines that the issues and the problems that we're talking about, they're always the same. Yeah, so it's not that companies and organizations are in so many different situations from each other. And we're talking here at ASUG about the same topics than I experienced, for example, in Germany, or what I experienced, for example, in the UK. It's not that topics and the challenges are absolutely different. Yeah, we are all in the same boat in the end, %.
Yeah, I think, and I was just over in your country last week, and I don't think these issues are radically different. I think it comes down to the acceptance that the status quo has changed. And we have 2 options. We can fight against it, or we can go, you know what, it's changed. And now we got to figure out how to adapt and move forward. One of the things that, I find maybe really de-energizing to me is when I'm back in some of these chapter meetings, and inevitably someone comes up to me and says, Geoff, all of this is great, but I have 3 years before I retire. Can we just get through the next 3 years? And I'm like, yeah, I need you to inspire this next generation to think differently and not just keep this glued together and spitballed together for a couple of more years so you can hand the problem off to them.
Hi there. Quick break for a short message before we go right back to the episode. Enjoying the insights and stories on transformation every day? Want to make sure you never miss an episode packed with practical tips and best practices from the SAP world, featuring conversations with some of the most interesting people in the SAP universe? Then hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform, whether it is Apple, Spotify, or any other you use. And if our podcast brings you value, we would be incredibly grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review and share it with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us. Thanks so much and happy listening. Absolutely. I would like to, just before we move to Zara, take one of the Q&As already, because that's quite interesting. One of our guests said, speed to innovation on-prem versus cloud. Many customers are stuck where they are to some degree, but for them, innovation never stops. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, if I understand the question accurately, I worry about is the business innovate around IT, right? So if we as IT cannot figure out a way to keep all these systems together, the business will go out and buy things. We live in a world where the business is more empowered than ever to go out and buy a license, buy a subscription, and do something and Frankenstein a process together, and then at some point show up in the offices of IT and say, look what I created. Now, guess what? I need you to integrate this and support it, right? And so that's why I come back to this notion that I think we really need to get back to some basics of, if we're going to spend most of our time as IT folks trying to cobble together an increasingly rambunctious application portfolio, where there's all these applications being thrown in, to me, that's not a rewarding enterprise. And so where I'm trying to get us out from behind our desks and go spend time with the business, if we're being pulled back in because we've got to integrate all this stuff and there's applications flying at us all the time, that to me is not a winning scenario. So I hear that question, right? To me, how do we as technologists get out in front of the business and figure out solutions before they come back to us with something that goes, I've figured this out. Now, guess what? You got to figure out how to support it.
Thank you very much. Before we move to Zara, let me ask one last question. How can ASUG support their members who are in that kind of situation?
There's a tremendous amount of activity happening at the local level. There, as I said, Alex, there are 39 ASUG chapters around North America. Hopefully one of them, or the people listening today, is in a reasonable travel distance from your house or office to this meeting, and they meet 3 to 4 times a year. To me, it's the best part of ASUG is not having to get on an airplane and spend hotel room nights, although we love that too, going to a city and spending 3 or 4 days at a conference. Go spend 4 or 5 hours with your peers. Listen to what they have to say. Listen to their challenges. Inject your thoughts into those meetings. Tomorrow and Friday, I'll be down in Dallas. I think there's a massive Dallas meeting taking place. Get out with your community and be part of the community and listen to how other people are dealing with these very similar challenges. The themes are consistent. As you pointed out, these are not North American themes. They are global themes. So we hear this in Germany. We hear this in the UK. We hear this, I will be down in South America in a few weeks. Same set of challenges. Coming together and talking through them, I think, is a huge benefit.
Absolutely. And Geoff, we will hear again from you when we are at the Q&As. I want to move to one who navigated already through a lot of these challenges successfully. And I think the statement that you said concerning, we the challenges are all the same. It's some relieving message in there, yeah. Because if it means that we have all the same challenges and we have examples like Zara or other examples, it shows that these challenges are actually solvable if we approach them the right way. And I hope Zara will give us some hints about that from her perspective. Zara, great to have you here today. Welcome and thank you for joining us and taking the time. Can you, before we start, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your role at Current Lighting and what your organization actually does?
Sure. So I work at Current Lighting. We are an industrial lighting manufacturer. Our tagline is "We're always on," which is phenomenal if you're a customer, little intimidating if you're IT. But that is our role. We need to be on, like all businesses now. IT is a 24/7 job. Uptimes are required to be at the highest level. We were talking about the MRP problem earlier, where the business was never offline long enough to do that. So I got brought in at a really critical and crucial time within Current's history. We're a private equity-owned carve-out of two large manufacturers for industrial lighting out of two larger entities. And as the second entity was bought and we started to merge these two former competitors together, we needed to look at a strategy of where were we going to go with our ERP. We had a legacy ECC that was heavily customized on-prem, had been running forever the same way across 20 plus years. It had been customized to fit and match their old ERP. So, you were talking to people who've been doing the same job for 4 years the same way, and it's always worked that way. And how can we possibly change it? I'm sure no one on this call has ever heard that from their audience. And then we had this new company that we brought in and that we were merging together, and they were already on S4. So we decided to take advantage of the opportunity of the company we just acquired, and rather than going backwards and moving them into the ECC environment we were on, we decided to take the original company and move them up and onto the S4 during the carve-out. So we had in what was planned to be a 12-month timeline, and we dragged it out to 15 months. We did a full carve-out and then full migration of the two companies into one solid platform hosted on Rise. So that I got brought in to kind of manage in the middle of that and pull it all together and figure out how to pull the rabbit out of the hat with that one. So that's what brought me here.
Interesting. So your main motivation was more out of let's say, necessity, and it just came together nicely that the technology was there, the offering was there, and it fit together perfectly.
That was very much so. We were in a situation where we didn't have to decide, well, are we going to migrate? We had two different systems. We did not want to pay to maintain two systems. And if you've got the older but stable and known platform and the newer, and opportunity being in the private equity world, we're a little bit more risk willing to go that direction. We'll throw the dice from time to time. The real goal was, how could we get into a rapid transformation, knowing that we are in a market that was constantly changing, knowing that we wanted to come in strong and be highly competitive in our space. We felt that being in a environment where, and I feel like all I'm going to do, Geoff, this whole time is just underline and put exclamations and maybe some hearts around everything that you've said, because it is the same story.
You're going to have better examples. Yeah.
We just did it.
You can have good
examples. Talk about it. We did it. But we were looking at it going, how do we take these two companies that have done the exact same thing in two different ways, both on SAP, and make a coherent story for ourselves about how we're going to run our business? And we didn't have to go through the pain of some of the companies I've talked to where we're trying to get off of 20 different ERPs, or we're trying to go off of multiple non-SAP systems into this, or having to debate how do we talk people into it. We had the amazing fortune of, we got to, one is newer, let's go that direction. So that helped immensely.
Hey, Zara, real quick, good to see you again. I know we've done this quite a bit over the last year and a half or so. But just to kind of build on what Geoff said around business transformation being kind of a journey, like a marathon, not a sprint, right? How did you kind of prioritize and manage those expectations within the organization as you kind of took those first steps into moving into the new S4 world?
That's where I think that our story resonates so well for so many people that hear it, why we've had this conversation so much. And it goes to one of the Q&A that's down there, Alex, which is, how do you get a business who's been two different businesses who've been doing things their own way and their own customization for forever. How do you align and come to an agreement on, we're going to go to standard, we're going to walk away from all that investment over time in this custom code, and we're going to standardize on what is easiest to maintain and easiest to own, takes our eyes off of keeping all those jobs running and keeping all those reports generating and the brittle architecture of it, and allows us to be out in the plants and out in our distribution centers and where we're actually making the goods and with our customers, getting the right product in their hands. For us, it was a two-pronged strategy with leadership. And this is where our leadership really made some just amazing choices across the board. One, they all stacked hands and aligned. We wanted the cheapest cost of ownership possible. And that just means you're not maintaining a lot of different customizations and you're not relying on thousands of pages of KV documentation to know what's going on in your system. You've made a choice to go with what's standard and to be in an environment where you can Google the problem, because everybody's got the same problem and you can go look up and find a lot of those resources. You can reach out to SAP and the RISE support team and they can see our environment. They don't have to rely so much on us to know what we've changed. So that was first, and it was really driven by cheapest cost to own. And that allowed us to rally around. We want to put our money not into sustaining technology, but into sustaining business. We want all of the dollars we spend to go into how we're transforming and meeting those business challenges and meeting the market where it moves and where it goes, and have every dollar that we spend when it's going to technology going to the business problem, not to the code that we are creating and putting in. And that alignment from the leadership down, agreeing across the board, this is our investment will be in us and how we do business, not in how great and amazing and unique our technology systems are. And because we're not selling this, we're not making money off of it. This is just how we do our business, and we make money off of the business we do. So let's go and put our money where it really gets the returns. And that second piece is aligning across the organization. Unless we could track actual dollars we were getting in the door, unless it was money and revenue we were making that we couldn't make without it, there was no custom code. We were not going to customize. So we have one place where it makes us money and we can tie to it. We've got a revenue stream that's linked to it. That is a business case that we could sit there and say, yes, this is going to make us money and it's worth the investment to do it. And I wish we'd known about BTP at the time. That'll help quite a bit. We're looking at how we move it out of that core layers so that we're even cleaner. But that agreement across the board made the discussions really easy with the end users. The nightmare scenario all IT teams have been in at some point is saying, we're going to standardize, and then everybody has their piece that they're sure meets the threshold and needs to be done. And there's not clear alignment on when you're going to standardize versus when you're going to allow customization. And you don't have clear guidelines. So everything becomes a discovery and a discussion. And that's where you can lose months of time in the analysis of what's going to go and what are we leaving behind. For us, it was really clear cut. If we don't make money with it, we're not even going to start the discussion. And we pushed that out from not from IT, but from that senior leadership down. And they had the conversations with the plants and with sourcing and with all of their teams and said, if you can show that we make money with the customization you've got, we'll talk about it. But if you don't have a revenue stream that we're billing for that ties to this, it's not even getting discussed. We're leaving it behind. You're going to learn standard. And that saved us months and allowed us to do those two transformations as quickly as we did, along with really great partners. But the decision early on, if it doesn't make us money, we're not going to maintain it. Committing to the lowest cost of ownership, and our investment is in our business, not our tools. Those became our guidelines that the users themselves would hold themselves accountable to. And then we were on an even partnership level with one another. No one was arguing for one thing versus the other. It allowed us to have a single continuous continuity across our methodology and our decisions. And everybody was in the same boat. There wasn't a sense of, well, why did they get theirs and we didn't get ours? It just leveled the playing field. It made it easy for us to partner together to get the right solution in our hands. We gave up some painful stuff. We gave up some things that we knew had made a difference and for 20 years was making it different and had some optimization. But at the end of the day, when we got into it, when we came back and said, okay, let's look at it and see if it makes sense to bring it in, we can't tie bringing that back to headcount reduction. We can't tie it to new revenue streams. And even begrudgingly, they'll go, it would be nice to have, but at the end of the day, we're meeting the customer expectation. We're getting the product out the door, and we can do our jobs with what we've got, and it works extremely well. And we're going to keep moving forward with that customization. So that was really
when Zara,
alignment. Go ahead, Geoff.
Zara, when you say that, what I think about is we may need to change some of the fundamental ways in which IT's cost is absorbed by the business. In many organizations, that's a centralized cost, and the various lines of business don't understand the cost elements of some of the stuff we're talking about. So to them, while we as IT think a modification is expensive, to them it's free. Right. So maybe long term, and one of the things I've been thinking about when people ask this question about, well, how do we change this paradigm? Maybe the cost of making a modification and the long-term support cost of that needs to somehow be modeled and given back to the business unit owner and said, we can do this for you, but this is going to cost you X dollars, euros a year. If you're willing, if you can make a business case that dollar is offset, to your point, by this amount of revenue, then that makes sense. You should be able to cover that in your business, in your overall budget. There's some areas in which over time, going back to the beginnings of IT, got pulled up into SG&A and became this kind of general big cost that no one knew what to do with. Maybe there's an opportunity now to reshift that and bring this back. Because, I mean, businesses seem to be okay paying subscriptions. They seem to feel it's okay to pay a subscription cost to get that. Why not have IT emulate a similar approach? Just a thought.
We do something similar now as we look at the BTP solutions and pushing it up and out and looking at bringing the business in to participate in the discussion of what is it going to cost to do this? And are you going to get the benefit to your team? Is your division, is your line, is your revenue stream going to benefit and increase? And so now as we do our transformation exercises and we focus on that, I know we'll go into that more later, Alex, but that's the driver internally is, can you tie this to the revenue you're going to get by doing this work? Or can you tie it to the cost you're going to carve out and cash that won't go out the door anymore? And if it doesn't tie into one of those, we don't look at it as a business. But if it does, then that's where we're putting our time and our energy and our focus. And we bring them into that discussion because it is a direct impact on how they run their business and their financials for how they are held accountable for being profitable within their area.
And that's a huge change that you hit in that little sentence. We decided to have no really modifications, customizations in there, because it means like basically turning around 180 degrees everything that we in the last 20 years did it like that. Of course, from my perspective, I was 15 years at SAP. I knew that promoting ERPs as a platform, like customer, you can do anything what you want with it. Yeah, was always a little bit of a lazy sell in my opinion. Yeah, because you just did a shortcut and all that nasty discussion that you did avoid. So it's just a platform. Do what you want. And on the other side, you had consultants who were measured. So the best consultant was the consultant who was able to translate the most exotic requirements into some weird custom code, and all of that has changed. And that means we have a huge change, not also just on the business side, but also on the consultative side, yeah, where consultants suddenly have to be the one taking care of the discipline and, sometimes being in a quite, let's say, heavy engagement with users who think like, oh, I have to take this kind of modification that we had back then with me because that's how we work. And that's why my question to you is that, did you in your organization and your colleagues in there, did you see the fit to standard feel limiting at first? And when did the value become clear for you?
That level of change management is always painful. The joke I made with the sites, and I volunteered. Nobody took me up on it. Not sure why. I did volunteer to take a dunk tank out to all the sites and say, look, you're going to go through absolute, all of you have your sense of safety and security and you know how to do your job. You've been doing your job for 20 years. You are experts at what you do. And my team and I are about to come take away all that security. And for a while, you're going to feel like it is your first day on the job. And it doesn't matter how long we spent training it until you're doing it and you're in that rapid response of trying to get a delivery out the door. It's going to feel brand new and it's going to feel scary and you are going to hate my guts for a while. And that's okay. You can put up dartboards with my face. I will bring a dunk tank. You can dunk me. like direct your rage, that's fine. I can take it. Please yell at me. Let's go solve it together. But that mentality, and my whole team has it, of we are in this with you. We're not inflicting this on you and then we're going to go hide behind a wall. We got down in the weeds. We went to the plants. We are in the facilities with them. We are helping fix errors that happen. It is very much this is our business and it is our job to work together to make it profitable. We cannot survive in an us and them mentality going through changes like this. It can't be IT together.
I love when you say that, Zara, because it's true that most of them figured out a way to do their business with the various workarounds that they've done over time, right? They've got their spreadsheets. They've got their ways of getting the work done. Some of it in SAP, some of it not, right? They figure that out. And you're going to come along and go, hey, we're changing up all of this. And they're like, well, wait a minute. I used to do this here and this here and this here. And I got the shipment out the door. Various acts of God to make it happen, but I did it. And now you're going to change up all of that. And I'm going to have to refigure out which pieces did you as IT make simpler for me, but which pieces did you leave on the ground that I now got to figure out how to get those done. And Alex, I want to go back to a comment you made a couple of minutes ago. I do happen to believe that we as customers of SAP have a new era of influence on our doorstep, which is how do we go back to SAP and say to them, here's how you need to make these business processes work in order for us not to have to customize them after you deliver them. You made a really interesting and I think an excellent point. For a lot of years, it used to be, well, if you don't like it, try to see if you can configure your way around it. And if you can't do that, write some ABAP code, right? And if we're really going to live true to this notion of we have to be able to run delivered fit to standard code, SAP has to be ready to deliver it. And I think there's some good arguments to be made. In some areas, SAP has done a good job on this. And in some areas, some of their business processes are not meeting the needs of the most businesses. How do we elevate that up and make sure we have SAP addressing it?
Absolutely. To move on to the next question that I have written on for myself. When we talk about that initial change resistance, how did you overcome that? Was change management a part right from the beginning where I said like, okay, it's clear if I have to move away from our, let's say, home turf, from our comfort zone, when you go back into the standard, we have to address this and we have to address this in an organizational way. And I know from my past as a consultant, like change management, quite often when you do a proposal, that's the first one that gets cut off, because it said like, change management, isn't it what the PMO can do by itself and so on? I guess you have your own strong opinion about that.
It's an area we should have done better. I've done more ERPs than I can remember to count now. And every time I come away going, we should have done that even better. There's no point where transformation is painless. If somebody's figured out painless, that's the podcast I want to listen to, is the painless transformation that somebody learned how to do, because I need to go learn from that. I don't know that it exists. For us, we did a couple things. We did have a change management group who came in. The problem we were having is they were used to working with a really, an 18 to 24 month timeline for an ERP transformation, giving everyone time to change. From the time that we had an environment where we could start testing until we went live was 5 months, because we had a deadline in terms of how long we had to get moved into S4 based on our licensing. So we had a crunch time that I remember the rallying point with my team in the business was, guys, this sounds impossible. Literally no one else has ever done this in the history of SAP that anyone can tell me. But when we survive all of this and get to sleep again, we're going to get to be the lucky few who get to say we're the only ones who've ever done this. And we are still the only ones who've ever done it. I will still say I'm not sure any of us would sign up to do it in 5 months again. That was an intense timeline. And it asked a lot of our users. And so what we did is we pulled all the key users in close and worked as fully integrated team. There wasn't a day that we weren't on calls together, that we weren't working through issues together. We set up in really small teams by area where there was the configuration person, the functional processing QA person, and then the primary users, 2 or 3 of those. And they worked in small little SWAT teams and just went in and worked as fast and as quickly through all of the data migrations and validations and data cleanup, because we weren't coming in clean. We were taking one business that had been an ECC and bringing them into an already existing business. So we had material that had to be mushed together. We had customers and vendors that had to be mushed together. We were trying to bring two businesses together at the same time as two big technology pieces together. And that had a lot of just brown mess in it. You talk about a brown implementation. Yeah, that is the color it was. So as we worked through that for us, what it had to be is that we worked so tightly and so closely together that it was very much that bonding in the foxhole situation. We documented together, we tested together. There were no separation. There were a lot of times when everybody was like, oh, I didn't know they were in the business. I thought they were IT. I didn't know they were IT. I thought they did the purchasing job. You could not distinguish between our teams because we were so tightly linked together. That made a world of difference because as we went live, as we worked through migration, as we worked through getting used to the new way business ran in this system, that integration, that knowing exactly who to call, who was in the trench with you, and working so closely together meant that everybody felt that support, felt that knowledge of what was happening. And we all knew and aligned on what we were doing and why we were doing it. Ultimately, we had to run this business as one whole company coming together, and we had to figure out how to come together in the timeline we'd been given. And so what could have been an absolute everybody throwing up their hands and going, this is impossible, we're not doing it, why would you inflict this on us, became how do we as a team accomplish this together, getting excited about this challenge that we put in front of ourselves and accomplishing it. And then also for us, it became, you can't do that kind of transformation that fast without making those hard choices. So leaving behind our customizations, that was big to get to a cloud environment where we could really do that rapidly. The second one was data. And I don't know that people talk about this much, but how important it is for those of us who've been in the ERP world for years. You talked about, for 20 years, we've all been doing it one way. One of the ways we've done it for 20 years is bring all your data with you. Transform 20 plus years, your entire industry background needs to come in and move into the main ERP, and you need to transform it into that new environment. Great about the cloud technology is we're no longer bound to that. You can move it into your reporting layer. You can move it into your data warehouse, have it available to meld with the new. We moved with 1 year's data and open transactions only. And that was a huge.
I think that is a magical answer. We seem to want to hold on to this data forever. But when I think about the next step of where we're going with all of this AI-enabled technology, this data is incredibly important to make good decisions. And if 20 years of data is going to give you 20 years of just circular garbage that you can't figure out how to navigate through, then it's not an asset. It's actually a liability. And, cleaning out that data and getting back to brass tacks of what's really important to this business, Zara, I think you nailed it. And by the way, if you can get some of this data out, I think it frees up a tremendous amount of time from the project teams.
Not only that, but also the actual cost, right? As you move into the cloud, you have that kind of additional liability to consider. I always talk to customers. I always make this joke, like most customers are data hoarders, right? They feel like they need 15, 20 years of history, when in reality, you really just need current year plus 2. You can make sure that you focus on cleaning up that data so it actually can work for you, especially as you move to S4 and you leverage some of these new reporting and analytics capabilities. When you start talking about Joule, AI, all this stuff, having a strong data foundation, I think, is really critical. And Zara, I think you mentioned, you've talked a little bit about kind of the role of the partner, right? SAP has probably, I'd say, the strongest partner community in the world. And, we at CBS, we're very proud of our culture. Maybe talk a little bit, I know you touched on it just a bit, about the culture fit and the importance, because at the end of the day, these projects that are big transformation projects, we talked about change management, we talked about fit to standard, all of these things are interrelated, right? The more customizations and the more fit to standard requires more change management, which is really all about managing people. How does that kind of cultural fit play a role in your transformation?
It's so critical to have a partner that is aligned with how you as a business are choosing to move forward. If you have a partner whose lifeblood is they got a massive op team and they got a massive build out team and they make all of their money on what they can build for you, and you want to stay standard, they're not going to be a great fit for you because their whole methodology is, we can go build that. And if your standard is, hey, we want to be best in class at using SAP as it was meant to be used, then they're not going to work with that. We were fortunate in that for our carve-out, we used CBS. And I think it's okay for me to say that Lorenz did call us a little bit crazy. It was like, you cannot do what you're trying to do. But they took the leap with Mark and they made a decision, we'll commit to this and we will help you do it in a timeline that has never been done before. And that engagement and that belief in what we were choosing to do and the challenge we were setting for ourselves made it a partnership that worked and made it possible to do the carve out and the timeline that we had and move through more than 100 integrations and getting those migrated and stood back up, moving off of what the prior company had hosted on to Rise and being a very early adopter in the Rise landscape and learning alongside them some of the things they didn't even know how to do yet because they didn't have enough customers who'd gone through this and helping them form their policies and their plans. And CBS for us was a partner who took those questions back to SAP, held SAP accountable and said, hey, our customers having to go through this. You don't even have a pipeline and a plan for this. And out of that has come the standard stable migration plans that Rise uses today that I've now seen and looked at and been like, we helped build that along with CBS. He partnered with us through that. That engagement so early, you need to find out, is the philosophy aligned? Do you agree on what you're doing and why you're doing it? Because with that philosophy alignment is going to come the right resourcing. Everybody's got a different bench in a different area, but if you don't have aligned philosophies and what you're doing and why you're doing it, then they're going to constantly be pushing or reacting to what users are asking for that maybe is aligned where your leadership wants to go. And so for us in any partnership that we're in, it's always, do we align on the philosophy of how we are choosing to run our business? And if we do, then that partnership will grow and flourish and continue to provide dividends over time.
And if you may allow me to add on that, Sarah, and to bring pop culture back into this Fireside Chat, because that's what Victor also very, very enjoys. There is a very, very great quote from the TV series House MD, with that sarcastic doctor. And the quote I really like is, with the choice of your doctor, you do the choice of your disease. And I think that very, very well translate also to our business, because with the choice of your SAP partner, you actually do the choice what you get out at the end. And I'm very, very convinced that if you would do the same projects with 3 different partners, you would get 3 different results. And that's why it's so important that you do not just like an RFP or something like that, but you really, really check, is the culture of the partner, does it fit to us? Does the partner see and understand and also thinks about the challenge that we are up to the same way that we do? And are his values in that case, with statements like, do it as a business initiative and not as an IT initiative and so on. Does he agree with our values, what we're up to? And I think this is one of the most important decisions you can take in this event. And whenever you, for example, talk to customers, organizations that, these kinds of conversations like, we are a brownfield customer, we just want to bring our old data and our old stuff to a new platform. That's perfectly fine. And then you dig a little bit deeper why the customer talks like that. You quite often come to the point that it's because he's like shell shocked from the last implementation, because that was something that really did not fit together, and there were these fights and struggles all the time and so on. And in the end, it's like grandfather talks about the war, and he does not want to have that experience again. And as such, of course, tries to do it different and on the light side and so on. And he misses all the opportunities and the good stuff. So it's definitely our responsibility as SAP consulting companies, I take the plural, to bring the positive attitude back into these programs and into these implementations, because this is what it's all about. It's not something that should hurt and that should be a painful exercise, but something that people look back and say, hey, I want to do the next project again, because it brought ourselves forward.
So Alex, if I think through kind of the conversation we're having about how to select a partner in this future fit to standard, highly scalable world, it can't be about their technical skills to recreate what you had before. It really needs to be about their skill set in understanding the business process as delivered, and then understanding change management and how to take your line of business peers through a process where they see that it's okay to think about the business in another way. If what you stack the project with is things you're traditionally familiar with, you'll get what you traditionally are familiar with. And I think, a lot of our fellow customers are potentially picking partners because they have a technical skill. Well, then you're going to get a technical outcome. And I think we live in a different world today. So how do we really go out and select the partner bases that really foundationally understand the business processes we're attempting to modernize?
And I think, Geoff,
Absolutely. And
your
especially
point
Always
really
easy
quickly,
to customize.
Yeah, just to quickly add on your point, Geoff, especially these more kind of the technical thing and what Alex said as well, right? Going just the brownfield, right? To me, in our view and our experience, just taking that pure technical upgrade, like, hey, let's just rip off the Band-Aid, let's just go to S4 and just kind of, is really going to be setting you back significantly. Because in our view, this move to S4 needs to be the opportunity to really build that foundation that enables that agility. Every customer is going to be slightly different. Not everybody will be able to be as aggressive in adopting a fit to standard, but it's really important to make sure that this clean core strategy is really at the core of your transformation, and at least you get started on that journey, right? Not everybody's going to be able to go 100% clean core right off the bat, but find that 20%, 15% to get you started. And maybe you focus on some of the more boring topics like authorization, so you can then build on your Fiori strategy in the future, your digital architecture, right? To make sure you have a modern cloud scalable architecture environment. Those things that aren't necessarily super sexy for the business, but you need to set up that strong foundation to be able to build on that moving forward.
Absolutely. And
No,
sorry, one
Alex.
sentence. And many consultants do the mistake in that occasion that they try to be more of a companion than a consultant. And this is something that can kill transformation projects very, very early, because transformation means you will do sparring and you will have these kinds of, let's say, challenges in the conversation and so on. And that's what you really should take care of when you choose your consultants, that the consultant is not just an expert in the application or in the module in SD or FI or whatever, but he is also a business expert in those areas where these components exist. So an FI consultant should also, of course, advise you on the best possible way to work in finance processes in that area. And this is definitely what you have to demand and expect from your consultants in that way.
You're spot on. And I'm coming back to Victor's point. I did happen to spend some time with a customer who did a lift and shift project and said afterwards, we got it done. I'm not sure if I were to do it again, I would have picked that route. Now, I'm just going to say every customer I speak to comes at this with a slightly different perspective. This is not a one-size-fits-all methodology. There are very different reasons why customers find themselves in different places. So I don't want to say point blank on any of this, this is the only way you should do it. But I think, when you listen, and again, coming back to the community, go talk to people that have gone through this and say, if you were to do this again, would you follow the same steps or would you alter your approach and what would you do differently? Very instructive.
That's definitely what we should ask Sarah.
Maybe.
We would have maybe taken a few more weeks. We would have given ourselves just a couple extra weeks.
But I like your 5-month tie box. I think that it forced you to make decisions.
It did. And there was huge value in using time as a constraint because it forced us on the data. It forced us on customization. We had to make the choices of, okay, now how do we do this? And you can't get the whole world when you limit that time. And ultimately, we talk about, well, if we'd had more time, we could have done a little bit cleaner. The reality is before, and this goes back to a question we talked about earlier, which is when did we see the value? Before we made the changes, we'd run about 8 or 9 projects the year before in ECC that had a total business value of just under $1 million in savings. And phenomenal projects. That's a great story for IT to be able to say that. Say we got $1 million out in a smaller business. That's phenomenal. The quarter after we were stable in the new environment, we ran 6 projects for a total of $5 million in value. And every quarter since then, we've run between 10 to 15 with continuous 3 to 5 billion in value to the business, either in new revenue opportunities or in costs being pulled out. So that for us, of when did it start to pay off? After 6 months, when everybody got comfortable, we gave them time to stabilize. We moved so fast, we gave them time to get comfortable in the new environment. And then we started tackling, okay, what's next? That pace at which we can move and bring value to the business, it took 90 days from the point we started kicking off new initiatives to realize we were in a whole new game spot in terms of the value that we could bring in a transformation we could do. And we work to do that every 90 days. We look at prioritize what's next, what's going to bring in the most value or reduce the cost the fastest. That is, we can use the tool that we now have to go accomplish. And that's been a massive change.
Perfect. Since we already have to take a look at the watch because our official time is over, maybe, and that's my question to the audience, maybe we can have at least a few more minutes, because I want to ask a little bit, at least one more question, then we have to ask the question and to answer the question that Joe Perino in the comment section did. To finish with that segment, Zara, just give us a short overview, please, about, what are your plans for the next quarters, maybe 2 years, because I think you're not done yet.
No, we're not done yet. Is anyone ever done? We wouldn't, we don't do it ourselves. We are in a continuous transformation journey. Every 90 days, we prioritize our next set of projects. We're looking at growing out and dipping our toe into the BTP space. We've been staying pretty close to core. And so we're going to start learning all the rest of the tooling and what's available. Long term, over 2 years, we're really looking at, can we move to the public cloud? We're in private cloud now. There's a lot of value and fit to standard. We've already made a huge leap in that direction. So there's a very, very strong path to be had for just how easily you can turn things on and turn small objects on that make for that business area in the public cloud. So we're doing that evaluation right now with SAP of what that roadmap would look like. Nobody's done that going from public to private cloud. So we will once again be challenging SAP to find new roadmaps for us. But looking at what that would do, and can that give us even better transformation than what we've done so far?
Perfect.
I think, Alex, a good case to continue this conversation in the future. A lot of good today.
Definitely. I already asked Zara for maybe she will spend another hour with me someday for a great podcast, because these are really, really fantastic insights. Zara, thank you very much for that. Before we close this session, we still have a question open here in the chat box, which is, I see a challenge in convincing the business to change the processes they're used to in our customized ECC solution. From an IT side, we are aligned, but how do you convince the business that moving to a clean core environment and being able to take new innovations is in all of our best interests?
Who are you throwing?
Who wants to go first?
Jeff, you want to go? Because I know you got to wrap.
I think no, we make it like that. Zara, I would like to have your opinion about of that based on your experience. And Jeff, maybe you have your spin on that too.
Well, I'll go real fast for Jeff's time. So for us, it really came down to leadership alignment. I talked about it at length earlier, just making that decision that we were going to have the lowest cost in all of our dollars for investment. We're going to go into the business and business process and not technology. So for us, that it was aligning it with our philosophy. If you can align your technology plan with your business growth and development strategy and your go-to-market strategy, it takes the contest out of it every time, because now you're aligning where you're putting your dollars with how you're growing your business. And that's easy for people to get behind. Jeff, how about you?
I think it comes down to, at some point, you need executive alignment, as you said, Zara, right? You have to be able to, and it may be that the CEO needs to step in and support the general notion of where this is going. Otherwise, some of it is just not going to happen. So I think there has to be executive engagement in this. And the dollars are large enough and the impact is large enough that this is exactly where a CEO needs to make sure that these steps are being executed appropriately.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And of course, we would be happy to continue that kind of discussions also with members from the audience. We are definitely reachable. And I think there are ways, of course, to get in contact with us. Definitely, if you want to follow Geoff, do that on LinkedIn. He's very active there. He has also his great podcast, ASUG Talks, definitely something very interesting to listening to. Zara, same on your side. People, I think, can connect with you via LinkedIn. Definitely also a good idea here. And the same with Victor and me. We're happy to continue that kind of discussion individually with you. Thanks a lot to everybody. What a great format. That's the first time we did something like that from our side, and definitely not the last time. We will continue that.
Thanks, Geoff. Thanks,
Zara.
Zara.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Victor. See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.